So he starts the first few chapters describing the crime for people who may not know exactly how it unfolded. And he gives you what he believes how it unfolded. So not just the facts again, but how he believes from analyzing Amanda Knox what went down, basically. So then here we go. So one of the things he does is when he analyzes someone's communications, he doesn't make any corrections to the misspellings or how it's been written because those provide clues to what's going on in this person's mind. And so he starts with the email. She started it off to my close friends. This email is for everyone. I'd like to get it out and not have to repeat myself 100 times, and etc. And then he explains that the reason she opened up this emails for everyone. And he's saying that her super intel or her higher intelligence, her unconscious, makes it clear that she's unconsciously addressing the entire world. Right. So she just commits this murder 48 hours earlier. And then she comes out with this email and says it to everyone. But before I go any further with that, I just want to go back a moment to explain a little bit. The super intel, as he's calling it here, are when there are slips from the unconscious into conscious mind when it communicates. So, for example, when the super intel always wants to tell the truth, even if the conscious mind doesn't. So, for example, with Amanda Knox, if you've murdered someone but you don't want to admit to it, you start writing the denials or describing and you're writing what happened. The super intel is going to push through and get the truth out somehow through symbols and word choice, and it's sort of like Freudian slips. If you really feel one way about something and you're trying to deny it or not admit it, but then you have a Freudian slip, that's an example of it. The super intel pushing past your conscious mind and having you say something and you don't even realize you said it came out. His theory is that this is from your super intel doing this. And he also points out that another way that the super intel gets the truth out to bypass your conscious mind is to put it in the negative. Because obviously, if you're Amanda Knox and you murdered someone, you don't want to say I murdered them. So instead, you're going to say I did not murder them. Obviously you're gonna. But this goes with everything she says that's in the negative. You can, in his way he analyzes it, way she's getting out the truth. But in order to get the truth out, she's putting it in the negative. So another way this works in analyzing writing is to take the negatives and make them positive, because he believes that's the super intel getting it out, even if it's in the negative. It's a little confusing, but once you analyze the way he does these writings, it starts to make some sense. So she starts out an email right after a murder saying this is for everyone. And then she acknowledges in the email that she can't talk to journalists, but she's assuming that everyone on this long email chain of people she sent it to won't say anything. When obviously she knows they're going to say something. It's going to come out. That was her intention, although she denies it in the writing of the email. I'm just sending this out, to get it off my chest, but I trust you won't send it to the journalists. So there's another example of unconsciously she wants to get this out to the journalists while pretending like she doesn't, again, saying the opposite of what she intends. So he also points out that she doubly underscores this email, and she keeps repeating this email throughout her email. He says to alert them to the fact that they have valuable forensic document in their hands. Okay, so next, I'm just going to skip through a little bit here. He also points out about key message markers. When somebody repeats the same word over and over, he calls it a message marker. He said, notice how often she repeats, going to talk, I've been talking, I need to talk. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. So she kept repeating that in her email, talk, talk, talk. So that's something that he pays attention to. This is what the email is about. She wants to talk. She wants them to talk, possibly. And he talks about you're looking for symbolic messages. Now, this is interesting. He read Waiting to be Heard, and he points out that her parents had told Amanda, stop stop writing this stuff, right? So she's in prison already. She's already she wrote a 5-page email. She wrote 3 pages of confessions, 3 different testimonies. I mean, she's writing and writing and writing. She can't stop herself. And he says that her superintelligence is obsessive and insistent and determined to reveal the truth, however figuratively, and so it is with her. So he's saying that, she couldn't stop writing. She couldn't stop. Her super intel was driving her crazy, pushing her to try to get the truth out one way or another. So it's like she was compulsive. She couldn't stop herself from writing so much. And so again, back to her email, she said, "I'd like to get this out and not have to repeat myself 100 times." So again, going back to the idea of pushing it out in the negative, what if she means the opposite? So what she's really saying here, as he points out, she does want this repeated 100 times, and she will repeat it 100 times. So he calls it read straight through the denial, bypass it and hear the message. He says, in fact, she very much intends to repeat herself 100 times. Now, remember, this email was written a few days after the murder in 2007. So we would come to find out in the next 10 years plus years that she has indeed repeated herself more than 100 times, right? It's interview after interview after interview after book after article after conference after conference. She goes speaking engagements at universities and schools, and she has not shut up. She's a nonstop talker about this, right? She's actually on a speaking website. Hire her to speak for you about her crime. She has repeated this story and everything that she went through a million times. I mean, and she said this in her very first email after the crime. I'm going to repeat. I do not want to have to repeat myself 100 times. Reading through the denial, I'm going to repeat myself over 100 times, so that she's setting her intention right from the beginning of what she was going to do. Whereas at the time, people didn't realize, but now we do, right? Looking back with hindsight. So it's very interesting. It just proves how accurate this thought print reading is of the higher intelligence or super intel, and paying attention to what criminals write after a crime can help, not only solve the crime and get their confession, but it proves to be accurate. So again, reading through the negative, and then he goes, one of the great ploys, he writes in the bottom sentence here, one of the great ploys of the superintelligence is to get the truth across by slipping it past the conscious mind with a denial. That way, the deeper self can say precisely what it desires to communicate about the crime, introducing the idea through a negation. All right, and then he goes to the bottom here. Another major tell about her denials is that she promises to repeat herself 100 times. And he says that is like, methinks thou dost protest too much. So in effect, Amanda promises to protest too much by repeating herself. All right, next. He introduced the idea of the police early on in her email, strongly implying her wrongdoing, suggesting that her conscience is eating her up inside. Those who pay attention to her images will learn exactly how to solve the crime. She hints strongly early on the prison of the mind. So she is, they say the police detectives talk about the prison of the mind, as well as psychologists, where after you've been through a traumatic event, or done a murder, which would be a traumatic event, it keeps replaying over and over and over in your mind, right? So you become a prisoner of it. And so Dr. Hodges is saying that she is in since this is only a few days after the crime, she is reliving it and she is in the prison of the mind, and that's pushing her to write so much. And that's what's driving her crazy and why she's repeating herself again and again because she can't stop thinking about it. It's looping over and over again what she did. So keeping that in mind when you read her email, that the images of the murder, of what happened, what she did, seeing Meredith's body, seeing the cleanup afterwards, all the activities that took place, they're constantly repeating, playing over and over in her mind as she's writing this email, so that Dr. Hodges takes the images of what she would have seen that night and shows in the email, this is why she's saying this like this or that in the email, because she's drawing from the images that are playing over and over, repeating, looping in her mind. Yeah. So here another negation that she talk to journalists, I hope you won't do. So again, reading through the denial, she's saying, talk to the journalists, which makes a lot more sense, right? Again, this is back in 2007 before she'd hit the interview circuit, before she was released. Nobody knew this about her, but she was signaling with a negative to her, whoever she sent the email to, her friends, family, former teachers, etc., saying, don't talk to the journalists, but here's what happened. Obviously, she was saying, talk to the journalists, repeated 100 times. Yeah. So there's just the beginning of the analysis. We'll be looking more at it if you're interested. Again, this is from the book As Done Unto You by Dr. Andrew Hodges. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.